Hey guys, tonight we travel back not to a castle or a battlefield, but to the dusty belly of the Persian Empire, somewhere between dusk and dawn, where a single rider tears across the earth faster than you can read your morning email. That's right. Before tracking numbers, before trucks, before even the word mailbox, there were men on horseback, racing across deserts, mountain passes, and rebel lands to deliver royal messages with military precision. No breaks, no weekends, no excuses. And tonight, you're one of them. You pull your cloak tighter. The night air is colder than expected. Your horse shifts beneath you, impatient. Hooves stamp against the rocky trail. Above the sky is bruised with stars, clear and unnervingly wide. Somewhere behind you, in a royal city you left nearly 2 days ago, a satrap is either trembling or scheming, depending on whether the letter you carry reaches the King of Kings in time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little sleepy empire stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The saddle creaks as you lean forward. A hawk cries in the distance, perhaps startled by the smell of something old and iron in the wind. The trail is ancient here, older than memory, worn into the stone by generations of hoofbeats. You're on the King's Road, the Royal Road, the artery of the Achaemenid Empire. It stretches nearly 700 kilometers from Sardis to Susa, and you're somewhere in the middle. To the untrained eye, this might look like a lonely stretch of wilderness. But you know better. Every few hours, hidden behind groves or built into rocky escarpments, there's a posting station, each manned by handlers, scribes, cooks, and the all-important horse masters. Your horse is one of many in a relay. You won't ride him the full distance, thank Ahura Mazda for that. You'll switch steeds every 25 to 30 kilometers, maybe sooner if the trail gets rough. The next one's just ahead, its breath already puffing clouds into the chilly air. The handler, half asleep with a wool blanket over his head, hears your approach and jolts up, eyes wide. He doesn't greet you. He doesn't have to, because you're wearing the sash. Royal couriers always wear the sash, deep red, embroidered with a golden pattern that's said to shimmer when you pass through firelight. No one dares delay you. In fact, if a handler makes you wait more than 5 minutes, he might lose a finger, or a hand, or worse, his post. It's not a glamorous job, but it's a sacred one. You're the king's voice made flesh, his command galloping through the dark. Historians still argue whether this courier system was the brainchild of Darius III himself, or if it evolved from older Mesopotamian practices. Either way, by the 5th century BCE, it was so efficient that Herodotus claimed messages could cross the empire faster than the sun could set. Of course, he was exaggerating. Or maybe not. Some writers said the relay system moved as fast as 200 kilometers in a single day. That's faster than some modern delivery trucks through LA traffic. The funny part, you don't even know what's in the message you carry. Could be news of rebellion. Could be an order to move troops. Could be a reminder to pay tribute or a death sentence for someone too slow to obey. But that's not your concern. You're not a general. You're not a judge. You're the blur in the distance, the dust on the horizon. You're sleep-deprived, saddle-sore, and very aware that if your next horse slips a hoof in that ravine over there, you're going to have to deliver the letter on foot. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive that. A small fire glows ahead. The handler has prepared everything. You dismount. Before your horse fully stops, swing the leather satchel from one shoulder to the next and toss the reins. The new horse snorts and stomps. It smells urgency. You check your water pouch half full. Thank the gods, secure your sash, and mount again in one swift motion. The switch took 90 seconds. Could have been faster, but hey, you're only human. As the firelight recedes behind you, you feel it again, that eerie quiet of the Persian wilds. Sometimes riders swear they hear whispers in the rocks. Others claim the gods speak louder when you're alone on the trail. You wouldn't be surprised. Out here, it feels like even time is listening. And if you're wondering whether these postal riders were a rare breed, oh yes, they were. Not just anyone could join the Angarium, the Royal Messenger Corps. You had to be able to ride fast, read terrain like a map, and survive off jerky garlic and barley bread for weeks on end. Not to mention, fend off the occasional bandit, or lion, or depending on your route, a group of very confused Greeks. You sigh. Your legs are starting to ache again, and there's still hours until dawn. Somewhere behind you, that satrap is probably pacing. Somewhere ahead, the king sleeps under a canopy of stars, unaware of the windburn on your face. And yet you push on, because in the Achaemenid Empire, no one outruns the royal male. Your breath comes out in white plumes, now matching the puffs rising from your horse's nostrils. The air gets colder as the trail bends upward, weaving into the early arms of the Zagros Mountains. You pull your hood tighter, grateful that someone at the last station insisted you take the thicker cloak. You hadn't argued. Riders who argue with mountain handlers usually end up cold or worse naked in a river, trying to warm up after a bad fall. The trail is rougher here, carved into stone by centuries of travel. The royal road isn't paved in the way you might imagine a smooth golden highway through the wilderness. No, this is the ancient world. The Achaemenids didn't lay down asphalt. They smoothed what they could, cleared what they had to, and let nature do the rest. But it is a marvel. You're not the first to travel this path. Merchants, envoys, priests, generals, all have walked or ridden this very ground. In fact, Herodotus, yes, the father of history himself, praised the Persian courier system for its speed and reach, noting that neither snow nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Sound familiar? That quote's now etched into the U.S. Postal Service building in New York. Ancient Persia, your OG FedEx. But unlike the mail carriers of today, you don't carry a sack full of wedding invitations and coupons for goat's milk soap. No. You carry one message, just one, written on parchment or clay or wax-coated wood. And that message, it's sealed, not with glue, with power. Persian messages bore royal cylinder seals, engraved stone rollers that left intricate patterns when pressed into clay or wax. If the seal was broken upon delivery, someone was going to lose their job or their head. That's why you check the seal now, mid-ride, just by feel. The clay disc is intact. Good. You don't want to know what happened to the last rider who fumbled a delivery during a rainstorm. Below you, a valley opens up. Small fires flicker in distant villages. Farmers sleep. Dogs bark at the wind. But the royal road continues uninterrupted. It runs straight through forests, fields, mountains, and deserts, all connected by one imperial artery. Built under Darius I around the 5th century BCE, the road allowed the king to move information across the empire in about 7 days. 7. That's the same time it takes modern airmail to get from Turkey to India when the post office is feeling sluggish. Historians still debate whether all 700 kilometers were constructed by Darius or inherited in parts from the Assyrians and Babylonians before him. What's clear, though, is that he systematized it. Station to station, rider to rider, without fail. He made it official. There were even distance markers and toll points. And if that doesn't sound modern enough, get this, the Persians also had what we might call a postal budget, with rations allocated for horses' fodder and, yes, emergency wine. The wind picks up again, stinging your face with icy grit. You taste salt, probably from old tears or new sweat, and realize you haven't blinked in a while. No matter. The next station is just beyond the ridge. You can see the faint flicker of its fire now. Each relay station, called a Piratazish, sits about 25 kilometers apart. That's the sweet spot, far enough to stretch a good horse close enough that it won't die under you. These stations aren't just stables. They're miniature hubs. You'll find a stable master, a record keeper, a cook, and sometimes when the region is dangerous, a small group of immortals, the elite Persian guards who ensure nothing gets stolen and no one gets clever. Your horse stumbles slightly, just a quick skip step, then regains rhythm. You mutter a soft encouragement, something between a blessing and a threat, and the beast pushes on. It knows the routine. And here's a fun fact to keep your spirits up. Some records suggest that Persian kings, paranoid and perfectionist as they were, would occasionally send secret riders behind the couriers. Their job not to carry messages, but to spy on the ones who did. If a rider stopped too long, lingered at a tavern, or heaven forbid read the message, well, let's just say he'd be replaced. Swiftly and with great ceremony, usually involving a cliff. You crest the ridge, and there it is, a torchlit way station, nestled between two boulders, smoke curling from a stone chimney. The stable master steps into view, his face lined with sleep and frost. He squints at your sash, then waves you in. Again, no words. Just practiced gestures. You swing off your horse hand over the reins and reach for the canteen that's being handed to you, lukewarm barley tea. Heaven, the new horse, is smaller but stockier, built for the rocky descent ahead. You exchange nods with the handler and mount. 90 seconds again. That's the gold standard. You wonder briefly if you're being timed. You ride on the horse, sure-footed, on the now sloping path. Somewhere to your east lies Persepolis, glittering in marble and firelight. You won't see it tonight, but it's there, the heart of the empire. The place from which orders are born, where kings stare down maps and murmur commands that ripple outward like stone drops in a vast lake. You're just one ripple. But oh, how fast you move. And as the station vanishes behind you, the wind now at your back, you think of something the Greek historians often forgot to mention. For all their admiration of Greek democracy and Roman roads, even they couldn't stop talking about Persia's postal magic. Because no one, not even Zeus himself, got the message across faster than a Persian courier at full gallop. The descent from the ridge is slower than you'd like, but safer than the alternative, rolling down the slope in a tangle of limbs, leather, and royal correspondence. Your new horse places each step with the caution of a gambler weighing his last coin. You let him because you know what happens to couriers who rush down loose gravel in the dark. They end up as cautionary tales whispered at way stations. A pair of torches flicker in the distance. They mark a checkpoint, one of many dotted along the royal road, manned by dusk patrols who check sashes, seals, and faces. Not to slow you down, no. These men are trained to wave you through in under 30 seconds. But if something doesn't add up, if your sash is off, if your face doesn't match the one described in the ledger, or if your horse reeks of the wrong province, you're not going anywhere. You approach the post, and the guards rise from their fire. Their eyes are sharp, despite the hour. One steps forward, peers at your sash, and then at the seal pouch on your hip. He grunts and waves a glowing stick toward your satchel. It's not magic, just a reed soaked in resin, burning bright enough to read your wax seal. Satisfied, he nods. Ride fast, he says. It's the only thing he's allowed to say. You do. The system works because of these silent links. The Royal Road wasn't just about the road. It was about trust rules and a shared understanding that if a message didn't arrive, cities could burn. The King of Kings Darius, or later Xerxes, depended on that network, the way your brain depends on neurons. Every station, every checkpoint, every stable boy was a nerve sparking across the empire's spine. Historians still argue whether these checkpoint systems evolved purely for postal use or were co-opted from military patrols. What we do know is that they worked efficiently, quietly, and with a kind of ominous elegance. In an age where bandits roamed freely and every road could end in robbery, the Persian system made mail feel sacred. Beyond the checkpoint, the land levels out. You pass fields gone fallow for the winter ghost crops outlined in frost. A thin fog hovers just above the ground, glowing faintly under the moonlight. In the distance, you spot a watch post built into a knoll. It's barely visible, unless you know to look a dark slit in the hill, with a fire hole carved into the roof. That's one of the signal towers. The Persian postal system didn't rely solely on riders. For messages too urgent, even for horseback, the empire had a network of signal fires, flames and smoke that passed coded messages across peaks, like a nervous system made of fire. Each station could send simple alerts, such as enemy approaching or royal birth announced with a sequence of fire bursts or colors. One blaze on a dry night could carry a message hundreds of miles. It's not as romantic as galloping across the plains, sure, but when the stakes were high, fire traveled faster than hooves. Still, the riders, you were more reliable. Fire could be blocked by rain or fog. A rider, well, he just kept going, or died trying. Not ideal, but effective. You pass another watch post, and this time, you notice a small pile of stones stacked neatly outside. 5 stones. That's the signal that 5 riders passed through this week. It's a simple, silent way for outposts to keep count without ink or parchment. You smile. You're not alone on this road, even if it feels that way. And just ahead, flickering between the trees, you see it, another way station. This one's older. The beams sag a little and the walls are patched with mismatched clay. A lantern swings gently at the entrance, casting soft arcs of gold onto the muddy path. You dismount quickly, hand over your reins, and barely glance at the hostler before grabbing the fresh horse. This one's nervous. Young. You don't like that, but you mount anyway. There's no time to be picky. A child runs out and hands you a pouch of dried apricots. You nod your thanks and tuck them into your cloak. Trail food. Keeps your jaw busy, keeps you awake. As you ride again, the forest thickens. The torches are fewer here, and the path narrows. Every crack of a branch sounds amplified. You keep one hand on the reins, the other near the satchel. Not for the seal, for the dagger beneath it, because here between stations is where things get tricky. Some riders carry decoys, fake messages, forged seals, even false satchels filled with sand. If they get attacked, they drop the decoy and run. Most bandits fall for it, most, but not all. You remember a tale whispered at the Susa station about a rider who outsmarted a dozen thieves by doubling back on a hidden trail, arriving at the capital 2 days early. They called him the Ghost of the Road. No one ever saw him again. Either he retired a legend or he died out there still holding the seal. Your horse snorts, ears twitching. You lean low, murmuring nonsense words, calming him. You wonder if the last rider to use this horse was as nervous as you are. Maybe he made it. Maybe not. And still you ride, because, on this road, time is not a suggestion. It's an expectation. And as you pass beneath an arch of sleeping trees, as the road dips and the stars blur with your pace, you remember what one handler once told you with a crooked smile. Sleep is for couriers who deliver late. You don't intend to join their ranks. The sun isn't up yet, but the air has shifted. There's a faint gray bloom on the eastern horizon, just enough to make the trees around you look like looming statues rather than ink-black blurs. You've ridden through the worst of the forest, and now the terrain flattens into the early fringes of farmland. Your back aches. Not from the ride itself, you're used to that, but from the sheer concentration. Every hour, you've been scanning for movement, listening for things that shouldn't be there. The metallic jangle of a hidden sword, the wet shuffle of a wild animal, or the dreaded silence that comes right before something bad happens. So far, nothing. Which makes you uneasy in a whole different way. At least now, in this open space, you can let your thoughts drift a little. The road straightens, carved like a ribbon, through low hills and plowed fields. You know this stretch. It's the approach to one of the more fortified relay points. And you know what that means? Time to check your load. You slow your horse slightly and slide a hand inside your outer cloak. The satchel is where it should be nestled against your ribs like a second heart. Inside, wrapped in waxed linen, is the message. On a thin rectangle of tanned parchment folded 3 times and sealed with a clay disc bearing the unmistakable pattern of the king's signet, a winged disc flanked by 2 lions. You don't open it. You never do. But sometimes, in the moments between exhaustion and adrenaline, you imagine what it says. A troop movement order. A tax warning. Maybe an invitation to some obscure celebration involving fermented camel's milk and awkward political alliances. You smile to yourself. But just a little. Riders don't laugh too much on the road. It uses up breath better saved for shouting at startled sheep. And now, a little fun fact. Persian couriers didn't just carry words, they carried worlds. Messages were not merely letters. They included military maps, carved tokens, wax-sealed tablets, even contracts etched onto thin metal sheets. Occasionally, they carried gifts, 2 coins, spices, rings, to curry favor ahead of more direct negotiations. The king liked to grease the wheels of empire. Historians still debate how much autonomy couriers had. Were they glorified postmen? Or did some over time become informal diplomats? Records hint at riders who earned enough trust to negotiate minor treaties or deliver coded threats that didn't require ink at all, just the presence of the sash and a few whispered words. And speaking of coded things, some messages weren't even readable by most of the empire. The Persians wrote in several scripts, including Old Persian Elamite and Aramaic. It all depended on where you were and who the recipient was. Most imperial messages were drafted by scribes trained in multiple languages, linguistic Swiss Army knives in a sense. The result, a standardized system where even distant corners of the empire, from Egypt to Bactria, could receive and interpret royal orders without delay. Of course, for particularly sensitive messages, codes were used simple substitution ciphers, sometimes even numeric ones. A common trick was to assign a list of numbers to words and only send the numerical list. The recipient would need the key or be very, very good at guessing. But you don't need to guess. You just need to deliver. The fortified station comes into view now. Built of brick and stone, its walls are higher than most, probably because it borders a less friendly region. You recall something about uprisings here a few years ago. Some tax official got too greedy, or too drunk, or both. The rebellion didn't last long. Nothing did when the couriers ran faster than the rebels could retreat. A flag flies over the compound. It bears the royal emblem in stitched gold sunrise over stepped mountains. That's the signal that the station is secure and awaiting dispatch. If the flag were down or torn, you'd ride past without stopping. Better to risk a tired horse than to walk into a trap. You slow at the gates. Guards step out. 2 of them. One wears a helmet slightly too big for his head. The other has the half-curious, half-suspicious look of someone who used to be a farmer but now gets paid to hold a spear. You nod. They nod. One of them mutters, "Name which you give." Then your number. Yes, you have one. All couriers do. Your identity etched in the records of Susa, tied to your face, your sash, and the kind of wax you use on your boots. They wave you through. Inside, you dismount. A younger rider is already there warming his hands by a fire pit. He looks barely 15. Probably new. You nod again, no words exchanged, and walk to the logbook. You sign in using a stylus and inkpot recording your arrival time to the minute. The stable master hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle. Dried figs, flatbread, salted fish. Trail rations. You slip the food into your saddle pouch and inspect your new mount. She's a beauty sleek, dark wide-eyed, but calm. You whisper something into her ear, a nonsense word that calms you more than her. 30 seconds later, you're back on the road. And here's a quirky little tidbit. Some of the saddlebags used in the Persian postal system had hidden compartments. Not for smuggling. Mind you, though, that did happen, but for weather protection. A double lining of oiled goat hide kept messages dry in case of sudden rain. If you think that sounds unnecessary, you've never had to explain to a general why his battle orders look like soggy pita bread. The sun is rising now, a pale smear against the horizon. The landscape glows gold and pink. For a moment, it's beautiful enough to make you forget your saddle sores, but you can't forget the message. You never do, because the truth is, you carry more than ink and parchment. You carry the illusion that the empire is in control, that it can stretch from sea to sea, across deserts and rivers and mountains without breaking apart like so many others. And it's your hooves that hold it all together. The sky shifts from soft pink to a more assertive blue as the sun lifts itself over the hills like a lazy king stretching across his marble throne. It's full daylight now, and that changes everything. No more whispers in the trees. No more riders wrapped in shadows. In daylight, the royal road becomes a different animal. Less ghost story, more parade route. Peasants trudge alongside their goats. Merchants set up roadside stalls with baskets of figs, dates, and pungent cheeses. A group of musicians, inexplicably cheerful for such an hour, plucks lutes by a mile marker, as if auditioning for a festival that no one invited them to. You pass them in a blur, your new horse at a smooth canter. The beast's breath puffs rhythmically, already, warmed by the food and fire from the last station. You don't name your horses not because you don't care, but because you don't have time. A named horse is a remembered one, and out here that's dangerous. The station handlers pride themselves on efficiency. At their best, they can swap out a tired mount for a fresh one in under 90 seconds. Think about that reins-off, saddle-checked pouch, secured rider mounted and gone faster than a modern-day tire change in Formula One. Some historians believe this might be the earliest form of institutional relay racing. Others argue the speed was a byproduct of fear, not sport. Either way, it worked. A courier's success, and often survival, depended on the seamless choreography of these pit stops. And every handler knew it. Some even kept sand hourglasses to time themselves. The fastest stations won extra rations wine, or if they were really lucky, a new thatched roof. Competition bred loyalty. Loyalty bred speed. You reach the next post just after mid-morning. The sun is behind you now, which is both a comfort and a motivator. You dismount without prompting, toss your reins, and take the new horse in one fluid movement. The handler gives you a quick salute, a thumb and 2 fingers pressed to his brow. A good omen. You ride on, and the road widens. Here, on the empire's central spine, the royal road stretches wider than usual, enough to accommodate camel caravans, royal processions, and military convoys. It's been flattened by centuries of feet, hooves, and wheels. It's dusty, yes, but also miraculously smooth in places. That's not by accident. The Achaemenids didn't just build a road, they built the road. Historians still argue about how much of it was constructed from scratch and how much was absorbed from earlier civilizations. What's not in dispute is this: the royal road was a planned, maintained, and guarded artery of communication, trade, and control. Engineers leveled terrain, built bridges over rivers, and dug drainage ditches to keep the path from flooding. In some regions, they used stone paving, in others, compacted earth. And in dry, windy provinces, they even lined parts of the road with gravel to prevent sand from burying it. You're literally riding on an ancient miracle of infrastructure, and you're probably overdue for a water break. You reach into your saddle pouch and retrieve a small gourd of diluted wine. Not enough to get drunk, never on the job, but enough to cut the dust in your throat. You sip, swish, and spit, like a tired priest blessing the road. Then, as you round a bend, you spot trouble. A cart is blocking the path. Not broken, just stuck. 2 oxen paw at the dirt, while a man in a frayed tunic yells things at them that you suspect even the gods wouldn't dare repeat. His wife holds her face in her hands. A child pokes the wheel with a stick, as if personal insults will free it. This would be amusing if it weren't directly in your path. But you're a royal courier. You don't ask people to move. You flash the sash. You slow just enough to let your horse's gait be seen clearly. The sash bounces with every motion, and the man's eyes widen as if he's just seen the ghost of Cyrus the Great himself. He scrambles, hauls the oxen by their yokes, and the cart lurches just far enough to clear your way. You nod. He bows. The child drops the stick. You gallop past. This is the power of the sash, not magic, not law, but a kind of shared fear and respect. It says, I don't have time to explain, and neither do you. You've never misused it, but others have. There are stories of imposters, thieves, spies, disgraced couriers who forged sashes or seals. When caught, they weren't just punished. They were erased. Names struck from the logbooks, face forgotten. Sometimes even their families paid the price. To prevent forgery, each sash was woven with a unique thread pattern. No 2 were alike. Handlers were trained to spot the smallest error. A stitch too tight, a tassel too short. And seals. Oh, don't get them started on seals. Royal scribes is to cylinder seals that rolled across wet clay to leave raised designs, hunting scenes, divine symbols, royal portraits. Some were so detailed that modern scholars still can't replicate the craftsmanship. Your fingers brush the pouch again. You can feel the weight of the seal through the satchel. Still intact, still cold, and still urgent. You pass another milestone, carved into a low pillar, 900 kilometers to Susa. The numbers are fading, but you can read them. You've trained your eyes to recognize markings at a gallop. It's a party trick among couriers. That, and being able to sleep standing up while pretending to listen. You don't stop, because out here, speed isn't just impressive. It's sacred. The road continues winding toward a thin thread of smoke in the distance, your next stop. Another station. Another horse. Another set of eyes watching your sash. And still the message rides with you, perfectly silent, perfectly sealed. You've been riding for what feels like days, though the sun is barely at its peak. The royal road rolls on endlessly beneath you. Dust, hoofbeats, dust, and more hoofbeats. But you don't complain. You don't even sigh. Because in your line of work, the moment you start counting miles, you start wishing for rest. And wishes are for people who don't carry messages that could change the fate of empires. The horse breathes steadily beneath you. Every muscle, primed, trained for this one purpose. You guide it without thinking, kicking gently here, shifting your weight there. Like a dance partner you've rehearsed with 1,000 times. Then you see the milestone ahead. Someone has scrawled a crude drawing on it, probably a bored child or a frustrated merchant. It's a little figure with wild hair, a scribbled crown, and something suspiciously like donkey ears. You chuckle quietly. Even royal roads aren't immune to graffiti. But what you're really focused on is the number 850 kilometers to Susa. You're getting closer. Not close, but closer. Still, speed has its price. Persian couriers were held to exacting standards. There were rules, very clear ones, about how long it should take to get from one station to the next. Each route had a schedule. Arrive too early, and you'd draw suspicion. What corners did you cut? Arrive too late, and you'd face consequences. And let's talk about those consequences for a second. Lazy riders were fined. Repeated offenses could mean expulsion from the Corps, or worse, reassignment to the salt mines near the Caspian Sea. And trust me, you really don't want to spend your retirement scraping salt in sub-zero winds while wearing a burlap sack and questioning your life choices. But fines were the light punishment. For cases of negligence, dropping a message, losing a horse, or breaking a seal without explanation, the discipline was harsher. Public lashings, demotions, or worse, being stripped of your sash in front of a crowd. That wasn't just humiliating, it was identity erasure. A courier without a sash was like a lion without claws. Still recognizable, but pitied more than feared. Historians still debate whether all the strictness was necessary. Some argue the rules were a response to earlier system breakdowns, maybe during Cambyses' shaky reign. Others believe it was Darius's attempt to build a flawless bureaucracy that ran smoother than his armies. After all, swords win battles, but letters win kingdoms. You see a dust cloud ahead. Not smoke, not fire, riders. Two of them approaching fast from the opposite direction. You tense for a moment, checking your satchel again. But relax once you see their sashes blue with a silver weave. That marks them as provincial dispatchers, not Royal Express. Probably carrying tax reports or grain inventory sheets. Important, yes, but not your level. As you pass, the lead rider raises a hand in greeting. You return the gesture, a closed fist to the chest, quick and clean. You don't stop. Couriers almost never stop for other couriers, not unless something's terribly wrong. You keep riding. Soon, the landscape shifts again. You're entering one of the Empire's drier regions, red earth, sparse shrubs, and the occasional skeletal tree twisted like it gave up halfway through becoming a tree. The wind here carries sand that scratches your face like tiny whispers. You squint and lower your hood. This is where it gets hard. The heat isn't unbearable, but it's deceptive. It drains you slowly. There's no shade, and the road seems to shimmer ahead like a mirage. But you push on. You reach a post just past midday, this one smaller, more exposed. The handler there barely has time to douse your horse with water before you're mounted again. No rations this time. Just a canteen refill and a wordless nod. Your new horse is taller, leaner. Desert stock, built for endurance over speed. As you ride, you feel the rhythm change less, bounce more, glide. These horses know how to conserve energy. And while we're talking conservation, here's a curious fact. Persian postal riders sometimes traveled with two horses. One carried the message, the other carried backup supplies, or was used as a spare. Not unlike a pit crew on hooves. The idea was that if one horse went lame, the rider didn't have to wait hours for help. He just switched saddles and rode on. Not always feasible, of course, only on long, unbroken stretches. But when it worked, it was genius. The road curves toward a low ridge, and you see a caravan in the distance, camels, merchants, guards. You steer wide. Caravans are slow, noisy, and chaotic. They always seem to be arguing about directions or prices, or who forgot the dried apricots. You zip past a blur of movement and dust. A few heads turn. One of the camel drivers shouts something rude about show-offs, but you're already gone. You remember a joke a handler once told you? How do you know if a man's not a courier? He tells you his name, his favorite color, and his opinion about taxes. You, on the other hand, are a courier. You don't talk much. You don't complain. You ride. And if something goes wrong out here, if a wheel breaks, if a horse dies, if a bridge collapses, you're expected to improvise. Build a raft. Bribe. A boatman. Ride a borrowed donkey backwards through a ravine, if that's what it takes. You don't not deliver the message, because, in the eyes of the king, your message is time itself. And no one disrespects the king's time. The wind starts to bite again. Only now, instead of dust, it carries something wetter, colder, a warning of a storm crawling over the horizon. You glance up. The sky is still mostly clear, but out east, thick clouds pile up like forgotten laundry, and the air hums with pressure. You keep going. Because of course you do. Rain, snow, heat, gloom. None of these are excuses for a Persian courier. There's an old saying among the Angarium. If the gods wanted rest, they wouldn't have made us fast. You're not sure if it's wisdom or sarcasm. Probably both. Your horse begins to breathe heavier as the wind picks up. The terrain here isn't helping. It's a shallow, rolling plain. But the soil has turned to clay beneath the thin, dust-slick, treacherous when wet. A bad fallout here might not kill you, but it'll certainly kill the schedule. And in this job, that's close enough. Ahead, the royal road narrows again, carved between two low bluffs. This section is known among couriers as the funnel. It channels wind like a flute, sometimes strong enough to rip a hood clean off or spook a younger horse into bolting. You slow a little, murmuring reassurances to your mount, who's already starting to twitch his ears in warning. As you enter the funnel, you brace yourself. The first gust comes sideways, sharp and dry. Then another, colder this time, pushing straight against your chest. You lean forward, tucking close to the saddle. The wind screams between the cliffs, dragging at your cloak, snapping it behind you like a battle flag. And then it hits rain, not a polite drizzle. A sudden, stinging downpour that slaps your face and soaks your hood in seconds. The road below turns slick, but your horse keeps its footing barely. You push forward, blinking hard against the sting. This is what separates the seasoned from the novices. Anyone can ride a good horse in good weather. But storms strip away pride and leave you with reflex and grit. Luckily, the Persians planned for this too. The royal road, in its more exposed regions, had occasional storm shelters, simple rock structures built low to the ground, barely larger than a shed. One such shelter lies just up ahead, carved into the face of the cliff. You spot it through the curtain of rain, like a dark mouth yawning open. You guide your horse toward it. No time to dismount. You just duck inside, pulling the animal with you. Inside, it's cramped, dry, and smells like hay and old sweat. There's a fire pit in the center, long dead, and scratched graffiti on the walls names messages, the occasional crude drawing of what might be a camel or an offensive caricature of a satrap. You decide not to interpret. You check your satchel again. The wax seal is still intact. The linen wrap around it has held up against the damp. You breathe slow, controlled just long enough to get your bearings. Then you give your horse a rub behind the ears, mount up again, and ride back into the storm. Because again, of course you do. Historians still argue about the total number of riders employed by the Achaemenid Empire at its peak. Some suggest thousands, others say fewer, with only elite routes getting full relay coverage. But all agree on one point: the system worked. How well did it work? Let's take a modern comparison. Today, sending a high-priority diplomatic cable from Istanbul to Tehran, roughly the same distance as Sardis to Susa, can take a few hours with military-grade networks. In ancient Persia, couriers could cover it in about 7 days using only muscle, horseflesh, and grit. And yet, delays were rare. How? Because of people like you. Every handler, every scribe, every stable boy had a role. But the courier bore the weight. Quite literally. The message never left your side, not for meals, not for sleep, not even for, well, nature breaks. That's why your belt carries a waxed pouch, light, discreet, and blessed by the temple scribes. You emerge from the funnel, soaked but unbroken. The land widens again. The storm fades behind you like a scolded dog howling as it retreats across the hills. The road ahead is glistening, the puddles reflecting sky. You ride harder, because ahead another challenge awaits: the salt flats. Wide, open, deceptively beautiful. The Persian Empire's salt plains could cook a man from below while freezing his lungs from above. No shade, no cover. Just heat by day, chill by night, and white earth that cracked like eggshells under the weight of a galloping horse. But here's where Persian logistics shine. Salt flat routes had special shade, stops, open canopies raised on stone columns, built just high enough to shelter riders from the worst of the midday sun. They weren't for sleeping, just for resting horses, refreshing water skins, and letting your brain cool down before it melted out of your ears. You reach the edge of the first flat just as the sun pierces the last shreds of cloud. The wet road beneath you turns to packed salt. Your horse hesitates, wise animal, but you urge it forward. The canopies rise like skeletal wings in the distance, strange and still. And suddenly, despite the sun, despite the storm, despite the ache in your back and the numbness in your toes, you feel it. Pride. You're part of something bigger. You're one thread in the vast fabric that binds this empire. A runner between minds. A whisper with hooves. And whether the wind howls, the rain bites, or the road disappears beneath you, the message must go on. The salt flats stretch out like a frozen sea, glittering, cracked, blinding. Under your horse's hooves, the white crust crunches with a strange, brittle softness, like stepping on ancient parchment. The sun above is merciless. It doesn't shine, it sears. And now that the storm's rage is behind you, it's replaced by something almost worse: silence. A thick, dry, humming silence that makes you acutely aware of every breath, every hoofbeat, every slight rattle of the wax seal on your hip. You squint into the shimmering horizon. Everything ahead looks like it might be a mirage. Even the royal road is barely visible here. No stone markers, no carved channels. Just a general direction, remembered in the bones of those who've ridden it before you. You You steer by instinct, by sun angle, and the faint hint of wagon wheel indentations that ghost the terrain like fossils. Your canteen is half empty. Your horse's breath has gone from strong to sharp. You murmur encouragement, rubbing the saddle horn with your gloved thumb, a small ritual to pass the time. That's when you feel it, the first hint of resistance. The horse slows. Its steps grow hesitant. You lean forward, whisper again. But this time, it doesn't listen. It shakes its head and stumbles slightly. Salt flats are deceptive. They look solid, but underneath pockets of brine, soft sinkholes, and sometimes sharp crystals that slice hooves like knives. You dismount. Yeah, walking the flats isn't fun, but it might save your horse. And without your horse, well, you're not a courier. You're just a very sweaty pedestrian with an overdeveloped sense of duty and a royal death warrant in your bag. You lead the horse on foot, feeling the sun draw sweat from every pore. The sash clings to your side, now soaked and slightly crusted with salt. The message, still dry, still secure. You think of the old saying, the road is not loyal. The message is, it's not meant to be comforting. Then, through the haze, you spot it. A figure. At first, it's just a dot, then a silhouette. Another courier. Definitely. You know the stance, the sash, the gait. But something's wrong. The horse is riderless. The figure is dragging one rein behind him. His cloak flaps like a torn banner. You call out. He doesn't respond. You jog forward, leading your own mount. As you approach, the man raises his head slowly. His face is raw, sunburned, and his eyes squint against the glare. You notice blood dried mostly. A bandage wrapped around his arm, soaked through. He mutters something. You catch only fragments. Attack. Outpost. Barely got away. Bandits disguised. And then you understand, the last station you were heading toward, it's been compromised. This isn't common. Bandits usually know better than to target royal posts. But sometimes, especially in regions where satraps are weak and bribes are cheaper than soldiers, rules dissolve. You glance at your own satchel, and you make a decision. You hand the man your water skin and give him salt tablets from your pouch. Then you guide him to your horse, tie the reins of his limping mount to yours, and send him back the way you came. You memorize his courier number. He whispers a thank you. You say nothing, because now you're going to do something you haven't done in years. You're going off-road. Persian couriers were trained for emergencies. Every major station had alternate paths, hidden goat trails, smugglers' routes, even dry riverbeds that doubled as silent highways. They weren't marked on official maps, but if you'd memorized the scribe's riddles and the handler's old stories, you could find them. You turn east toward a gap between two low cliffs, a canyon trail, narrow, shaded, dangerous. But at least it doesn't have bandits dressed as guards waiting to slit your throat and pawn the king's seal. You ride again, and the silence here feels different. Not the vast, crushing quiet of the flats, but a focused, alert hush. Birds scatter as you pass. Lizards dart across warm rocks. You press forward. Half an hour in, and your instincts kick into full gear. You hear something soft, hoofbeats, not yours. You dismount again. Flatten against the canyon wall. The path ahead is tight. And if someone's coming the other way, a rider rounds the bend. Not a courier, no sash, no satchel, but a sword. He sees you. You don't hesitate. You throw a fistful of salt dust into his horse's face, an old trick. The beast rears blinded. The rider tumbles off swearing. You dart past him on foot, grabbing your reins, dragging your horse into a sprint. You hear him curse again, then cough as he eats a mouthful of salt-crusted gravel. You don't look back. Persian couriers didn't train to fight. They trained to survive. Every station drilled emergency evasion tactics, how to hide in plain sight, how to blend in with caravans, how to use your sash as a makeshift sling or bandage. The Empire didn't expect you to win battles, just to make it through. You break out of the canyon onto a flatter trail. The royal road reappears ahead, like an old friend waiting patiently. You've lost time, but not the message, and not your nerve. You ride again faster than before. The wind returns this time from the south, warm and dry. It carries the scent of tamarisk and distance. You've beaten the bandits. You've outpaced the storm. But your greatest challenge is still ahead, because the message, whatever it is, must get through. You're back on the royal road, but everything feels sharper now. Every tree branch looks like a signal. Every traveler's face is a potential mask. Once you've been ambushed, even nearly, it changes how you ride. You don't trust the silence anymore. Still, the rhythm returns, hoofbeat after hoofbeat, like a metronome set to the pulse of the Empire. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you see them, 3 riders, not dressed like couriers, not bandits either. Their robes are too fine, their posture too stiff, and they aren't on the road, they're beside it, riding parallel, watching you. You instinctively tug your sash forward to make it more visible. The red and gold glint slightly in the afternoon light. That alone should be enough. It is. The riders veer off, disappearing behind a dune. Possibly guards. Possibly spies. Possibly just wealthy men who didn't like the look of a courier galloping like death was on his heels. Which, to be fair, you are. You reach the next station just before sunset. It's heavily guarded, and the gatekeeper waves you in with no questions asked. You dismount and head straight to the officer in charge. He looks you up and down, noting the salt stains, the flecks of dried blood that aren't yours, the frayed edge of your sash. You hand over your satchel. Not the message, just the satchel for inspection. He grunts. You met trouble. You nod. He doesn't ask for details. Instead, he gestures toward a nearby tent where a team of elite guards is stationed, the Immortals. 10,000 strong at full strength. They're the Achaemenid Empire's finest, but only a handful are ever assigned to postal duties. That's how serious the king is about keeping his mail system pure. You rest for 10 minutes, just 10, enough to wash your face, change your cloak, and down a thick barley porridge that tastes like regret but fills your stomach. Then you mount again, this time with an escort, one immortal, quiet. He rides behind you at a distance, far enough not to spook the horse, close enough to intervene if your luck turns sour again. His presence is both comfort and pressure. If you fail now, you'll fail with a witness. Historians still argue over the exact role of the Immortals in the Persian postal system. Were they just muscle? Or were they also a quiet surveillance network? Letters got through, yes, but so did reports. A courier might carry a message from one satrap to the king and not know that his very behavior, his route speed interactions, was being watched and judged the whole way. It's possible you're being judged right now. The stars begin to bloom above you. The desert cools. The world hushes. Then, from the road ahead, the flicker of movement. A rider galloping toward you, alone. Your escort drops back slightly, a silent signal to prepare. You slide your fingers toward your belt, where a small curved blade waits, not for show. You slow your mount, waiting. As the rider draws close, you see it, the sash. Blue and white, not a threat. The courier pulls up beside you, panting. Storm hit the north route, he says quickly. River crossing gone. You're the only one left from this leg. They diverted all others east. You nod. The escort behind you doesn't speak, but adjusts his reins slightly, acknowledgement. You ask the blue-sashed courier what he's carrying. He holds up a sealed package, bulky. Probably military. You don't ask more. That's not your business. He salutes. Good luck. Then he's gone. You and your shadow ride on. The terrain changes again. Low hills, thin trees, more scattered settlements. You pass a temple dedicated to Ahura Mazda, its fire altar glowing warmly inside. Outside, two priests sweep dust from the steps as if it's a sacred act. One looks up and gives you the kind of solemn nod only old men and statues get right. You remember what the handlers used to say? Even the gods wait for the post. You press forward. Your horse stumbles slightly, just a slip on a patch of loose gravel. But it's enough to remind you that you're not invincible. You pull back the reins. Check the saddle straps. Take a breath. You've been riding for over 14 hours today. And yet, you keep going. Because somewhere ahead in the distance, you can't yet see someone waits for this message. And whether it's a battle order or a love letter from a king to his distant wife, whether it's tax code revisions or a quiet directive to remove a rival, it's not your place to judge. Your job is to carry it. Across windstorms, ambushes, and treacherous ground. And you will, because when you wear the sash, you ride for more than speed. You ride for the rhythm of the empire. You ride for its heartbeat. And tonight, as the moon rises silver over the road, you and your horse are that heartbeat. The moon climbs higher as you ride deeper into the night. By now, your body has passed through pain into numbness and back into a strange kind of calm. It's the courier's rhythm, your muscles moving before your mind, your eyes adjusting before you even think to blink. Out here, instincts are sharper than thoughts. Thought slows you down. Your escort, the silent immortal, keeps his steady distance. He hasn't spoken a single word since joining you. You suspect he's one of the few assigned specifically to monitor the higher priority dispatches. You wonder if he knows what's inside your message. Maybe, maybe not. The immortals rarely need to read anything to know what's going on. Still, it's not his job to deliver the message. That's yours. Ahead, the next station flickers into view, more of a checkpoint than a full relay post. Just two guards, a small fire, and a wooden gate across the path. You slow your horse and nod. The sash catches the firelight like a banner. One of the guards lifts the gate. The other squints at you, then at the escort, and wisely decides not to ask anything. You don't dismount. You don't need a new horse yet, and the fire is too small to offer warmth. Instead, the guards hand you something better, a small clay vial. Ink. You raise an eyebrow. It's for the scribe ahead. Apparently supplies are running low. You tuck it into your pouch next to the sealed message. Now, you're carrying two things that could tip the empire slightly in one direction or the other. Funny how much power fits into a pouch smaller than your fist. You move on, and this perhaps is a good moment to slow your thoughts and consider the real artistry behind the system that you serve. The Persian postal infrastructure didn't begin with fast horses. It began with fast scribes. Long before messages moved, they had to be born. And to do that, Persia employed a network of master scribes men and occasionally women trained from childhood in not just writing, but translation encryption and poetic diplomacy. These weren't mere clerks. They were calligraphic tacticians. Imagine this: a royal order is spoken in Old Persian. It must be translated into Aramaic because the recipient lives in Babylonia. But the recipient's satrap prefers Elamite, so the messenger must carry a duplicate in that language too, all written by the same scribe in the same evening while fasting for a religious observance and sitting cross-legged on a carpet that hasn't been cleaned since Cyrus was king. And then the ink itself. Oh, the ink. It wasn't just soot and water. Persian ink was a blend of pine, soot, copper sulfate, and honey. That's right. Royal messages were sometimes held together by the very thing bees make to keep their queens alive. There's poetry in that. You remember visiting a scribe's chamber once long ago, before your first solo run. It smelled of parchment rosewater and anxiety. The scribe was an old man with eyes like river stones and fingers stained black to the knuckle. He didn't look at you when he handed you the scroll. He just muttered, "Guard it like your spine." He didn't need to say more. Now, as you ride through a narrow canyon lined with jagged rock, you feel the message at your side like an extra rib. You shift in your saddle not to make yourself comfortable. Comfort is a luxury, but to ensure the pouch is still pressed securely against your side. It is. Your escort whistles once soft and low. You halt. He rides up beside you for the first time, points ahead with his chin. You strain your eyes. There's a movement on the cliff above. Small. Maybe animal. Maybe not. You both wait. Then, after a moment, a shape scuttles away. A goat. Or something goat-sized. You exhale. The escort says nothing and falls back again. The only message you get from him is the one written in muscle tension: "Stay sharp." You ride on. Soon, the canyon opens into a plain again, and in the distance you see a flicker of something unusual. A scribe's tent. Not at a station. Out in the open. It's rare, but it happens. Sometimes, the Empire sets up temporary ink camps in regions where messages are being relayed rapidly. Battle zones, disputed territories, political hotspots. This one looks recent. The canvas is still white. The guards posted outside are yawning but alert. And there, hunched over a flickering oil lamp, sits a scribe copying a message onto 3 separate scrolls with frightening speed. You dismount, hand over the clay vial, and without a word, mount again. The scribe doesn't look up, just nods. You think of the bees again. You're not stopping here. Your message is too urgent. And as you gallop away, you realize something. This network, this sprawling web of riders, horses, seals, and fire-coated towers, it only works because everyone plays their part without fail. No room for ego. No room for hesitation. Only one rule: the message gets through. You ride harder. The wind is behind you again. You welcome it like an old friend. It smells of olives and dust, the scent of provinces further south. You're approaching Elamite territory now. Susa isn't far, not in courier terms. Your legs ache. Your back screams, but your fingers tighten on the reins, because now more than ever, the Empire needs its heartbeat, and tonight you are its pulse. Dawn creeps in again, thin and pale. You've been riding through the night with only brief stops, just long enough to swap horses, refill a water skin, tighten a strap. Your world has narrowed to 3 sensations: whined hooves and the reassuring thump of the sealed message pouch against your ribs. Susa is still a few hundred kilometers off, but you're on the Empire's most sacred stretch of road now. This is the King's Backbone, an immaculately maintained segment where the stone is flatter, the milestones more ornate, and the guards more likely to arrest you before asking questions if anything looks off. It's ceremonial in a way, like the last few miles of a marathon lined with people who clap not because they know you, but because they understand what you've survived. And here comes the next ritual. The checkpoint scribe. You spot the small domed hut by the road. A painted sign above its arch bears the emblem of the King of Kings' wings unfurled over twin lions. Outside, a lone man sits on a stool, stylus in one hand, tablet in the other. His eyes rise the moment he hears your approach. You dismount automatically. He doesn't ask for your name. He checks the seal with practiced fingers, brushing off a fleck of dried mud. Then, he scratches something into a clay tablet. Your number, your time, the condition of your sash. Behind him, a fire pit glows faintly. There's a pot on it. You hope it's barley tea and not more ink paste. He waves you through. The escort says nothing, just follows like a quiet echo. But you're starting to wonder. He's not just a guard now. You think he's watching for something specific. Maybe another courier. Maybe a rendezvous. Maybe even the person the message is about. You press on. The road tilts upward now gently, but enough to make your thighs burn again. You welcome the pain. It means you're still moving, still alive, still out running the things that don't belong on the King's Road. And it's around this bend that you see something strange. A man, walking, alone. He's not a courier, no sash, no satchel. He carries only a staff and wears a dust-colored robe. When he sees you, he steps aside, bowing low, eyes averted. But you notice something odd, a second pair of sandals tied to his belt. New. Clean. You slow your horse. The escort does not. He rides past the man without so much as a glance. You feel the tension in your shoulders ease. Probably just a pilgrim. Maybe heading to a shrine in Susa. You've heard there's one near the city gates, a temple where merchants leave offerings to guarantee safe travel back west. Still, you keep an eye on your rear view, so to speak, until the man disappears behind the bend. Here's the thing about being a courier. You start seeing the world in layers. A scribe's tent might be more than a writing station. A traveler might be more than just a traveler. And a simple road could hide more secrets than the palace it leads to. Historians still argue whether Persian couriers were allowed to carry personal messages. Some sources suggest it was forbidden, too risky, too corruptible. Others claim there were gray scrolls, unofficial notes passed along with a wink and a coin, often between nobles, sometimes between lovers. No one can agree. But out here, truth and regulation don't always gallop at the same pace. You've never carried a gray scroll, not knowingly. But once years ago, an old woman at a station handed you a cloth pouch with figs inside. She said it was a thank you for her son, who'd made it home from war because the king's orders had reached the front in time. You still think about that. The road begins to flatten again. You spot a grove of date palms in the distance, planted not wild. That means irrigation. That means people. That means civilization is creeping closer. And there, nestled between the palms and the road, a lone rest station, modest but well kept. It's the final station before the capital gates. Beyond here, couriers are expected to ride straight in without stops unless ordered. You dismount, hand off your horse. The station master greets you formally. He's older than most, with a beard that looks like it's won several arguments with time. He examines your sash, checks your seal, and says something rare. You've made good time. You nod. He looks at the escort behind you, and him. The immortal doesn't reply, just hands over a token. The station master blinks, then bows slightly. Not to him, to whatever he now knows about your mission. You're given a new mount. Sleek, gray, battle-trained, you mount. The station master doesn't offer food or drink, and you don't ask. He simply raises one hand in farewell, and then you ride again. The road ahead is lined with markers, each one more ornate than the last. They tell stories in their carvings, victories, floods, diverted palaces built. You don't stop to read them, but your eyes catch glimpses. One shows a king raising his arms as lions bow. Another depicts a courier leaping from his horse, a scroll outstretched. You wonder if he made it in time. You intend to, because now you're approaching the place where messages stop moving and start meaning. Susa awaits. The first thing you see isn't the city walls, it's the shimmer. Susa rises like a mirage over the plains, its baked brick towers glowing gold under the morning sun. The road straightens its final stretch, lined with flowering shrubs and trimmed tamarisks. The capital doesn't just appear, it announces itself. Your horse senses the shift too. Its ears perk forward, hooves thudding harder on the firm road as if it knows this is the end of the race. The immortal rides slightly closer now. Protocol. No courier enters the capital unaccompanied at this speed. Too many risks, assassins, false messengers, eager bribe givers with heavy purses and heavier secrets. As the gates draw nearer, you slow to a trot. There are lines of merchants, pilgrims, and tax officials, already forming, each one clutching scrolls or goods or sick goats, hoping for passage or permits or redemption. But you don't wait in line. The gate captain sees your sash before he sees your face. He doesn't ask questions. He steps aside and calls to his men. One lifts the heavy beam across the inner gate. Another clears the narrow pass. Your escort flashes his token, and the guards go rigid. Then you're through, hooves clicking on clean stone as the walls of Susa swallow you whole. Inside, the city is already humming. Vendors shout in Elamite Aramaic and Greek. Scribes hurry across courtyards with armfuls of documents. Camels groan at being unloaded. The scent of warm bread, dung rosewater, and ink hangs in the air like a welcome and a warning. You've been here before, of course, but only a handful of times. Couriers don't linger in capitals. It's bad for efficiency and worse for humility. Yet Susa always leaves a mark. She's no longer just a city. She's a living bureaucratic heartbeat. Every policy, every war, every whispered betrayal, it all flows through here. Your horse weaves expertly through alleys designed to disorient invaders. The escort makes no sound, no signals. But your route has clearly been decided already. You're not heading to the public courier lodge. No tavern, no scribe's hall. This message is going uphill. You pass the bronze lion fountain, its mouth trickling with clear water. A little girl drops a fig in it and runs giggling into a crowd. You don't stop. Next comes the Hall of Couriers, its red banners snapping in the breeze. The guards out front see you but say nothing. One of them mouths something like "fast one," but you're gone before it registers. Then the rise. The road climbs sharply toward the palace quarter. Terraced gardens fan out to either side, populated by date palms, cypress, and flower beds groomed by men who have never once ridden through a storm, with a message that might crush someone's future. You admire their work anyway. It takes discipline to prune roses. Just a different kind. The stone beneath your hooves is smoother now, too smooth. Your horse slips slightly. You ease it back to a trot. The escort pulls ahead for the first time, flashing another token at the final gate. It opens. The Apadana courtyard spreads before you. It's quiet here. Too quiet. No market noise. No livestock. Just the shuffle of sandals, the whisper of scribes, and the faint rush of water from the royal canals. Sunlight strikes the columns like they're being anointed. Birds wheel above in lazy arcs. This is where messages become memory. The immortal dismounts. He turns to you and nods once. It's not approval. Not quite. Just recognition. You dismount too. A servant appears silent as a breath. He gestures to a shallow pool where you may rinse your hands and face. Ritual cleanliness. Not just about dirt. It's about the message. You clean yourself dry, your hands on a linen cloth handed to you, and finally reach for the satchel. You haven't opened it once. You've barely even looked at it. But now you cradle it like a sleeping child. You are led through a side corridor, through a narrow hall, painted with lotus blossoms and winged lions until you reach the message chamber. It's smaller than you imagined. Just one low dais, one cushioned bench, and one figure waiting, a senior court scribe, flanked by two guards with spears that look ornamental but are definitely not. The scribe is older than dust and more precise than geometry. He gestures. You step forward. You present the sealed packet. He examines it, running his fingers across the seal's pattern without breaking it. Then he nods. Your job is done, except it isn't. The guards step forward, not toward you, but toward the doors. They close them silently, sealing the chamber. The scribe looks up directly at you for the first time. You're to remain, he says, voice like brittle papyrus. The king will send reply by you. You bow, you say nothing, and you wait. This isn't normal. Replies don't usually go by the same writer. But sometimes, rarely they do. When discretion is more valuable than speed. When the message concerns not just a province, but the very idea of empire. You feel your muscles locking back into readiness. No sleep yet. No bath. No wine. Not until the second message moves. Historians still argue whether the Persian postal system was as centralized as it appeared. Whether riders ever went straight to the king. Whether messages were always read, copied, filtered before reaching the throne. But you're not a historian. You're the courier, and the seal on your hip is still warm from the ride. You sit in silence. Not out of fear, though that's there too, but out of ritual. This chamber is a vessel, and you are part of its ceremony. The scribe doesn't speak again. The guards don't move. The doors remain shut. In the quiet, even your breath feels too loud, like it's echoing off the marble. Minutes pass, or is it hours? You're not sure. Time inside the palace flows differently, like it's been diluted in the perfume of bureaucracy and power. You try to stretch your legs subtly without shifting too much on the cushion. The scribe notices. He doesn't react. That too is part of the performance. At last, the inner door opens. Two figures enter. One is another court official, tall, draped in a layered robe of midnight blue with silver stitching that shimmers like starlight. The other carries a fresh clay tablet still warm from the fire, wrapped carefully in silk. It's not the reply. Not yet. It's the content of the reply scribed and waiting for the royal seal. And then you hear it footsteps, not hurried but purposeful. Several pairs, and in walks the royal seal bearer. Not the king, not today. The King of Kings doesn't touch most messages himself. But the seal bearer is no less terrifying in his own right. You've seen him before, once from a distance, when you delivered a dispatch during a border dispute near Egypt. Back then, he wore green. Today, crimson. He carries a small gold case, no bigger than a melon bound in rope. Inside is the royal cylinder seal, carved with the authority of Ahura Mazda himself. With that seal, words become law, orders become history, and fates are carved in stone. The tablet is placed on a low stone table. The seal bearer checks it silently, then presses the cylinder across a strip of fresh wax. The result is a continuous design winged figures, sacred beasts, and the cuneiform script of the High Court. No one speaks until he finishes. Then, with a voice that sounds like it was boiled in ink and burned on parchment, he turns to the scribe and says, "This message rides with the red courier. No stops, no substitutions." The scribe bows. The guards bow. You bow, because you are the red courier. They rewrap the tablet carefully, not in linen this time, but in oil-treated silk, stitched with the king's personal sigil. You recognize it's seen only a handful of times in your life. Not every courier sees it once. You've now seen it twice. The scribe stands and approaches you. "You are to deliver this directly to Satrap Pharnaces," he says. "By hand. No intermediaries." You nod. "No replies expected," he adds. Then, after a pause, "But expect eyes on the road." He means spies. That's nothing new. What is new is the satrap's name. Pharnaces governs a border region where loyalties bend in the wind like reeds. He's powerful, popular, and has recently been too quiet, too efficient. It's the kind of efficiency that makes kings paranoid. You understand now the message is more than a note. It's a test, not just of Pharnaces, but of you. If the message gets through untouched, unbroken, and unnoticed, it signals control. If not, you press the pouch to your chest and secure it beneath your inner sash. You're given no written route, only a glance from the seal bearer, which tells you that your return path will not be the same as your approach. You'll ride out through the lower east gate, not the courier's lodge. No public stops. No contact with handlers, not pre-cleared. You're a ghost now. The escort doesn't return. You are alone again, which strangely feels more familiar than the marble floors and silken courtyards. You are led by torchlight down a side corridor that eventually opens to a narrow courtyard where a fresh horse waits, black tall, already saddled. a stable boy, bows and hands you a water skin. It's heavier than normal. You unsling it slightly and hear the slosh of something thicker. Wine. Emergency wine. You nod your thanks mount and ride out of the capital without fanfare. The lower gate opens to a quiet path, flanked by low stone walls. Beyond the land stretches open hills and scrub, empty farmsteads, and the occasional flicker of movement that could be a bird or a watcher. You don't care. You ride. And now, in the solitude of open ground, your mind returns to the message itself. You don't know what it says, but you know what it means. It means someone at the top is watching someone near the top. It means the postal system isn't just an artery of communication. It's a scalpel, or a dagger, or a match waiting to be struck. Historians still argue whether Persian couriers knew the true impact of what they carried. Some say no. Others say yes. A few believe some writers even shaped events, choosing which roads to take, who to delay, what eyes to let see them pass. You don't consider yourself that clever. You consider yourself fast and loyal and unbroken. So you press forward past the final stone marker, etched with the words, "The empire rides on the backs of men who do not stop." You don't stop because someone in a marble room lit a lamp, and now, 1,000 kilometers away, a man named Pharnaces will sleep with one less illusion. The empire is listening, and you are its voice. The path east is narrower, less traveled. No merchant caravans, no temple processions, no lazy traffic of goats and gossip. Just you, the whisper of hooves on cracked earth, and a horizon that keeps moving no matter how fast you ride. This route is deliberate, not the shortest, but the quietest. You pass no way stations, no inns, no checkpoints bearing the royal sigil. Every interaction, every handoff, every fresh mount must now be trusted to pre-cleared allies, shadow couriers, and unmarked handlers posted in farmhouses, outposts, and half-forgotten granaries. And the worst part, you don't know who they are. You only know the signs, 3 stones stacked by a cypress. A clay jug turned upside down on a wall. A dog with a red ribbon tied to its tail. All things you were told once years ago, in a whisper over barley bread and dry wine by a handler who has long since disappeared. This is the hidden road, the part of the royal road that doesn't appear on any scroll, but exists in the memories of riders who've survived this long. It's strange, really. You'd think this route would make you nervous, but no. This feels familiar, like slipping back into old boots. Painful, tight, but known. You pass the first marker at noon, a cracked milestone with no number. Only a chipped bird carved into the stone. From behind it, a figure steps out, young, cloaked eyes down. No words. He holds out a water skin and a leather cord with 3 bronze beads. You take both. The beads aren't decoration, they're a coded signal. They say the way ahead is watched, but safe. You nod. He disappears back into the scrub. Your new horse is lighter, nimbler. Better for rough terrain. You let it pick its own pace through the dry gullies and sharp bends that define this part of the empire's fringe. It's here between rock and sun that you remember the stories. They're never told in cities, only on the trail. The courier who outran a sandstorm by riding into a flooded ravine. The woman who disguised herself as a goat herder and delivered a message disguised as a folk song. The boy who rode day and night only to arrive and find his recipient already dead. But his message still read aloud. True or not, it doesn't matter. The message always arrives, even when the world does its best to silence it. You reach the second marker by nightfall, a tree stump burned black with a single flower blooming from its center. You don't understand the botany, but you know the code. A relay is nearby hidden. You circle a cluster of boulders until a rock shifts and a man appears from behind it. Older, weather-beaten, wears no sash, but carries a horse branding tool with the royal crescent carved into the handle. He grunts. Ride far. Farther still, you reply. He nods and whistles. A door opens. Not a real door, just a gap between rocks and brush. Inside, a saddle already sits on a waiting horse. Black, broad, unblinking. The man tosses you a small pouch of crushed figs, sweetens the mouth, keeps you alert. You ride. The wind shifts again. Cooler now. You're climbing higher ground, edging into a hill range that separates satrapies like ribs, dividing a chest. The stars come out flickering. You recognize their patterns instinctively. One marks the direction of Sarpir Ridge, your last landmark before reaching Farnik's territory. You whisper to the horse. Not because it needs it, but because you do. And here comes the next test. A crossroads, unmarked. No torch, no guide. But you remember left is faster. Right is safer. Left means cliffs, loose stone. But the satrap's compound lies just beyond the ridge, maybe a day's ride if nothing goes wrong. Right means an extra night, an extra stop, an extra risk of being intercepted. You don't hesitate. You turn left, because the message isn't yours. But the responsibility is, as you ascend the ridge, you feel it in your bones. This is the point of no return. You've crossed so much of the empire. Its deserts, rivers, salt plains, fire towers, scribal halls. You've raced shadows. You've outrun silence. But this is the edge of the blade, and there on the ridge's peak, with the moon casting your shadow long across the stone, you pause, not to rest, but to listen to everything you've carried, to everything that waits ahead, to the weight of ink clay and silence. And then with one last look behind you, you ride down the other side into the dark. The message is still sealed, and so is your fate. You descend the ridge just before dawn. The road, if you can still call it that, is little more than a goat track winding through loose rock and the occasional stubborn shrub. It's quiet here, not in the peaceful way, but in that strange, loaded quiet, like the land itself is holding its breath. You ride with your body leaning forward close to the horse's neck, letting the animal choose its footing. Halfway down, you see the smoke, thin, controlled, not a fire a signal. You slow. It's coming from a plateau ahead, just above a bend in the trail. You count the puffs. 2, then pause. Then 1. Not a warning. Not a danger call. It's a confirmation. They're expecting you. As you round the bend, the satrap's compound finally comes into view. Low walls of sun-baked stone, a double gate flanked by soldiers too still to be farmers. You're not quite in Farnik's domain yet, but this is the final post. A place that exists outside the map and off the record. The guards step forward as you approach, but say nothing until they've both scanned your sash, your horse, your face. Then one nods. You're early, he says, not as praise but as fact. Another leads you inside. The compound is modest, more of a fortified outpost than a palace, but clean organized. The kind of place run by people who understand that neatness buys time when chaos arrives. They lead you to a chamber, bare stone-walled, with just a low bench and a copper basin of water. You know what this is holding. Not for punishment, for protocol. They don't let couriers wander loose, even trusted ones. Not this deep into delicate territory. They offer no food, no questions, only stillness. So you sit and wait. Not long after the satrap's emissary arrives. Not Farnax himself. Not yet. This man wears dark red, no insignia, no jewelry. He's younger than expected, but carries himself like he's tasted every flavor of betrayal at least once. He gestures toward your pouch, the message. You shake your head. By hand you reply, voice steady. To the satrap. Direct. He stares at you for a moment too long, then nods. You are led through a smaller corridor, down a slope, into what seems like a garden. But the plants are muted, and the path is lined not with flowers, but gravel and low thorns. A place for walking and thinking, not for leisure. There beneath a fig tree, shaped by pruning and age, stands Farnax. He is not grand. He wears plain robes, hair tied back in the Elamite-style sandals, dusted with the same dirt you've ridden through. He looks up from a scroll as you approach and says nothing at first. He simply watches. You bow. He gestures. You remove the pouch slowly, carefully. You do not kneel. You do not need to. The sash grants you standing here, even in the satrap's presence. You present the message. He takes it, unwraps it, turns it in his hand. The seal remains unbroken. He nods once, small but real. He does not open it. He tucks it into his robes. Then he speaks. You've come far. You don't reply. He studies your face. And yet, you do not ask what it says. You meet his eyes steady. Not mine to ask. He nods again. This time it carries weight. You'll ride back tonight, he says. But not through the royal road. Of course not. He turns, walks away. You are dismissed. No reward, no applause, no ceremony. But the message has arrived. And now, as the sun begins to rise behind the fig tree, you take your first real breath in days. A long one. Letting it fill the corners of your lungs that haven't had time to notice they were empty. The escort returns with a new horse. Fresh. Quiet. You mount and ride west, no longer carrying a message, only its echo. And now, beneath the weightless sky and the soft return of dawn's light, you feel something you haven't in a long time. Stillness. The hooves are quieter now. The air is warmer, gentle even. The hard edges of the empire begin to fade behind you, and the road, though long, feels softer somehow. The message is delivered. The seal is broken. The duty for this moment is done. And though your body still aches from the journey, the rain, the sand, the endless road, you carry nothing now but the hum of your heartbeat and the slow rhythm of your breath. There's peace in the silence, the kind that comes only after a race run well, after storms survived, after paths chosen not for ease, but for truth. You are not the king, not the satrap, not the scribe. You are the line between them, the thread that binds decision to outcome. And now, like all threads, you rest. The horse beneath you exhales softly. The sun warms your hands. Somewhere far behind you, the capital buzzes with new messages, new orders, new questions. But they are not yours. Not tonight. Tonight, you are a shadow drifting home through golden dust with nothing to prove and nothing left to carry. Let that thought linger. Let your breathing Match the gentle sway of the saddle. Let the road stretch quietly ahead with no urgency and no destination but calm. You did your part, and that's enough.